Oh, landmines and jellyfish. Welcome back to Knives, I guess. I pooped too hard and now I'm cranky. So, TEMUGEDDON is upon us. And we are on episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the Temu edition of the Superbudget Showdown. Let's get the ground rules out of the way real fast. It's got 4 ground rules. 1, it's got to be 15 bucks or less. 2, it's got to have a locking mechanism for safety. 3, it has to have a pocket clip. And 4, that pocket clip has to be tip up, and that's just to give it the best chance it can have of being a good knife for me personally. And the wife went through and picked almost all these out. She had a good time doing that. And, those 4 requirements make it hard to find knives under $15. She was scrolling for an hour, sometimes 2 hours to find one viable candidate. So this has interesting challenges going into it. And we tried to filter out all the clones we could. I know some of them are clones. And for that, I apologize. We sent back everything we could that we identified as a clone before we ran out of time. So I did what I could. One thing of note, this right here has been listed as a clone of a Strider. And I finally saw the Strider that it was a clone of, and yeah, it's 99.99% of a clone. Like, everybody was right. The ones that I saw when I looked them up were different models, G10, stuff like that, and they looked a lot more different than this one does. So yeah, confirmed. I'll call this a clone. But the one we're going in on this week is going to be this one right here, and this is one that's marked as a Browning. This has been identified as a clone of something, but I can't remember what. The guy that pointed that out might show up in the comments and let us know. But this has gotten its week of carry. Of course, I took my cheat day for something nicer. And I'll say right now that this thing carried kind of odd. Let's get the specs that I have out of the way. You've got a thumb plate here. Let's flick the plate. Oh, man. This is so hard to do sideways, guys. But let's flick the plate again. Successful plate flick. All right. So you got a little over 3.5 inches of blade. It is marked as a Browning. You've got a liner lock. The pocket clip is tip up, which is the Lord's carry. And when I was carrying this thing on me, it felt like I had a brick tucked in my waistband. And that may have been, because Tim School of Fish sent me a larger version of this from Ned Foss. So that one's also a clone of something, and I mean a much larger version. And that thing carried very comfortably, but that was before I had to start wearing a belt because clothes are getting looser and looser all the time. So this one felt like a brick. I felt it there. It wasn't necessarily rubbing so much, but it did feel like I had something very bulky tucked in the waistband. So that was definitely an interesting experience. And the pocket clip, as weak as it is, and as poorly designed as it is, like, you can see the gap right there between the wood scales and the pocket clip. It held up really well. This is one that I could jam in the waistband over the belt with no major problems, which made it a lot more convenient to access and store. I thought this thing would bend way out of shape, and I mean way out of shape, getting hung up like that, but it did just fine. So for a bit of a weak pocket clip, it actually held up. It did okay. One thing I did notice after I did the preview is the blade is kind of off-center. It's not off-center enough to impede performance, but I noticed that like 40 minutes after I did the preview. The thumb plate hasn't been a big deal. Like, this is comfortable to open and close. You've got nice access right here cut out for it. Let's flick the plate again. And the factory edge was okay. It cut the multiple layers of saran wrap off a pallet with no major issues. However, it did hang up on that single layer quite a bit. It shaved just a little bit out of the box. Just a little bit. And so this thing carried really comfortably at work. It did its cutting well enough. Didn't have any major issues there. And Cardboard Slayer. Let's talk about Cardboard Slayer. Because I have been sitting here in the war room for the better part of an hour cutting up cardboard. And this thing got 500 cuts. And there is no major edge wear. It's a little tiny bit more worn out than it was from the factory, but it's still going very strong. And, I'm looking for at least enough edge damage to start tearing the copy paper when I cut it. No, there's next to nothing. Let's see if I can get this cut right on camera, guys. The struggle is real. All right, so let's get in here. You know, it's gotten a little bit rougher than it was, but it's nothing too major. Always a second cut, guys. One day, I'm going to get these right consistently, and I'll show you all. But good God, that second cut always bites me in the nuts. So, you know, I'm really, really thoroughly surprised at the performance on Cardboard Slayer. Let me reach for some newsprint here. Yeah. Okay, so we got the sales flyer, the really thin, lightweight paper, and this should be absolutely no problem for it. But, get out of the way. Get out of the way. You know, just the tiniest bit of tear, but nothing hangs up. There's no major issues. So that 500 cuts is really impressive because the rest of these, they took around 300 cuts to start showing wear pretty significantly. So I am very thoroughly impressed. I do wish I had the specs for this and that I had the blade steel to tell you what it's supposedly made of, but I got nothing. So one of the other things is while I was doing those 500 cuts, you know, if I held it like I'd been cutting, kind of like this, it did hot spot a little bit, but when I moved back to a more normal hammer grip, it was fine. And I don't normally hammer grip stuff, but when you're pushing through that many cuts, the hammer grip is a lot more convenient. And of course, holding it like this, which was the easiest, put my finger in the way of the cut and reduced the amount of slice that I had. Because, you know, I'm going in tip first and pushing all the way across while I'm pushing down. Something else to note too, the geometry on this for cutting cardboard has been the best one that I've had so far. It didn't really hang up until I got way back here at the thickest part of the blade, and even then, if I had my edge alignment right, it didn't notice it. When the edge alignment was a little tiny bit off, it would get stuck right here, but from here back, very, very clean, easy slice. Sometimes it went too fast, and it hit the little chair that I'm using to hold the cardboard up, so the knife doesn't slip through the cardboard when it comes through to the end and go downward into my knee or my foot. I am a big dork for safety, so I'm trying to figure out the best way to do these safely. You know, I am thoroughly impressed by the performance of this thing overall. Like, the only major drawback is it is a beefy boy. It's got some gravity to it. You know, if I wasn't wearing a belt, the right-hand side of my pants would definitely be getting pulled down below the end of my shirt, and I'd have to be tucking it in nonstop. I still had to tuck it in a lot more than usual, but again, I'm going to contribute that to the weight and the pocket clip not being the deepest carry in the world. So, I think we can all guess where this is going to wind up. And this is definitely taking the crown for first place right now. This did way better than I expected, especially on the Cardboard Slayer test. So, we are going to give this a clean, comfortable first place. And I am so impressed by it. I wish I knew what this was. I wish I could remember what the original model was, because I could recommend the original as long as the blade steel is a little bit higher quality than this. That's going to be tough to beat. I'm going to assume this is like 3CR13 or 440A. Those are the cheapest steels you can get on these things, and that's what's pretty endemic to all of the under $15 knives. Sometimes you get 9CR, sometimes you get 5CR, so I mean, those things, the differences aren't huge between those, I've come to find out. Like, the difference between 9CR and 440 is non-existent. The 9CR is made in, I believe, Japan, and they just gave it a different designation than 440A, I believe, which is wild to learn about that, because, you know, the whole time I thought, you know, 9CR was going to be a way better steel than 440, but when you get the heat treatment right, they're both great steels, especially for someone that's not in a hard use environment. I would trust this to beat on it pretty hard, and even the liner lock. Like, this is an adequately thick piece of steel in that liner lock, and the lockup is, come on, focus, is a little over halfway through, just past the halfway mark on the lockup. So again, like all folding knives, you know, I wouldn't be going in and hitting this tip and prying upwards. That is just asking for problems. But everything else, I would trust this knife with. This is one that it wouldn't get carried that often because of the weight and because of it feeling like a brick in the waistband. But, you know, the weight and the bulkiness aside, I would trust this knife to do a lot of work. And I would trust the edge to hold up for a while. So, I mean, that is a very comfortable first place. This is kind of, it's dominated everything else. And, you know, this one was slightly less comfortable, and it only took 300 cuts before big edge problems started showing up, or bigger edge problems. So yeah, first place. I was very pleasantly surprised by that performance. And that being said, after 500 cuts, I just got tired of cutting cardboard. You know, I feel like this probably could have pushed into 600 or 700 cuts, especially with how little that edge wore down. So, I mean, this Temu stuff is just a mixed bag. This is part of why I wanted to do this. I expected way less performance out of these things, but I am being constantly surprised, which is also kind of a display of how little I really know about the edge retention of these steels. And so at some point, we're going to do our next super budget showdown, and they're not going to be Temu junk. They're going to be better stuff. At least that's the plan. And so when I start going into Cardboard Slayer on that, oh boy, I better pack a lunch. But as an aside, Tim School of Fish, I will see your purple monster and raise you the actually good, far superior purple drink. This GT Grape Nos is just a gift from the baby Jesus. So, all that being said, thanks for looking at my crap. Subscribers, thank you so much. You guys keep coming in, and I'm so grateful. It is humbling that you guys are watching this and getting something out of it. Comments, I love a little feedback, so let me have it. All that being said, y'all have a nice day. Oh, and by the way, come back in a little bit here for the preview of next week's knife. Okay, thanks for watching.